if you go back, and in fact, just the other day, I listened to a War on the Rocks podcast with one of the participants had just been in Ukraine visiting the front line, and he had a very, very pessimistic view. He said, the fix of the manpower, it didn't happen. Kursk, they're being pushed back in Kursk. They've got one main supply line. We don't know. And kind of the feeling was that while Russia has long term problems, right, the war is not really sustainable for Russia for a lot of reasons we're perhaps more familiar with because we like running down Russia. Ukraine is having these other difficulties, and they were kind of pessimistic, right? And so beginning November, they were kind of worried about how long the Kursk salient would hold out, what would happen. You fast forward a month, right? And what happened in that time? In that time, Syria collapses, right? And the Russians are on the back foot. And the North Koreans, yeah, sure, they were in the beginning of November. They were new, they were coming in. Yeah, sure, but they weren't a big deal. The Kursk salient. It's been a lot of people will say, "Oh, Russia has taken back from the initial gains in Kursk that the Ukrainians made. They've taken back an area the size of Singapore," which I would point out, Singapore is not the biggest place to, but they still hold a significant portion of that area, and the Russians have been committing forces, and the Ukrainians have been tearing them up. Tank losses are really mounting, and there's increased kind of effort to count. People are looking at satellite images of the three main storage yards where the Russians keep their Soviet era, their reserves of tanks, and the parking lots are empty, right? And so they're running out, and their losses have been they've been very, they've lost a lot in Kursk. So they still have the manpower problems. The war on the ground, which at one point, there was in November, these guys, there was some kind of concern. Yeah, this is not going well. Well, it's stabilized a bit. Now we look at Russia and we see that Russia is having all these problems in Syria, and they are losing a lot of their strategic position around the world. And so we're kind of seeing this strategic situation change. At the same time, Ukrainians now have the ability to fire our weapons as deep as they want.